Today, I have three people with me. We have Dr. U. Grant Baldwin, Dr. Cara English, and Dr. Fanike Young, all doctors of behavioral health and affiliates here at Cummings Graduate Institute for Behavioral Health Studies. So to my distinguished panel, I would love to hear your thoughts on the topic of news anxiety and why is everyone talking about it right now?
With a brief response, I think everyone can really relate to just the news anxiety we are all feeling as an immediate response to bad news. It has been nearly, 2 full years and almost a third of just what feels like constant bad news, not much good news nationally, globally, lots of, from the pandemic to, racial tensions and, all kinds of, conflicts with federal government legislation that is, seems to not really represent the thoughts and feelings of the people, as well as, certainly lots and lots of racial tension and aggression and failure to take accountability for systemic racism and white supremacy. And so it definitely, in my body, when legislation or bills are proposed and I see it in the news, I immediately feel my blood pressure rise. And I can say that in the past 2.5 years, I've definitely experienced incremental rise in my blood pressure to the extent that it is now difficult for me to control a resting heart rate lower than 80 beats per minute, which is at the pretty much the top of the range where you really want to see your resting heart rate. So this is an experience that a lot of people are having, especially those who consume a lot of news. But, even those who don't consume a lot of news and are hearing about these bills that are being introduced or the bad news, are certainly experiencing that type of a physiological response, a mental health response, an emotional exhaustion response. And I'll stop there and let my colleagues speak.
I'll kind of jump in here. So you mentioned something, Dr. English, and you said even for people that don't watch the news. So in my household, we do a lot of talk radio. So we listen to NPR a lot. And so we get most of our news from there. And it's really to limit the, that visual exposure to seeing the images. And we turned the news on the other night and the baby was there and it was they were in the Ukraine and there had been a bombing. And so we immediately had to turn it off, just not wanting him to, see those images. But outside of that, then we have exposure to, social media. And so it's everywhere, even when you're like, well, I'm going to limit my exposure, you get on social media to talk to your family or your friends and you're scrolling and then there's information and it's on the radio, so it's everywhere. And I think we were already dealing with COVID and anxiety from that, and then of course prior to COVID, as you said, the exposure for the police shootings and systemic racism and all. So it's really like one thing after another. And so a lot of us have come to normalize anxiety, like it's become a part of our day to day, and it's not supposed to be normal. It is still a disorder. And so many of us are walking around with it though. And it's hard to get rid of it or to shake it or to really manage it, because as you start to manage it, then something else comes up. And so I want us to really be conscious of what we take in, how much we take in, and really how much we expose ourselves to what's happening in the world, unfortunately, because we all want to know what's going on. But it's so hard. I think it's just hard on our nervous system in general. And I'll stop there.
Well, just to add on to that, on both responses is basically when I reflect on as far as the news anxiety piece of, ever since, the George Floyd situation and the overexposure of that, until this very day, I still have not watched that video in completion because I already knew, I was not sure how I was going to respond to it. So I listened to everyone else. I looked at the different images on TV, it's just snapshots and different other things. And it's just amazing how, you're visually seeing something and then you're hearing everyone else saying it, and it's triggering. I'm just saying as a person, and in the midst of that, while this was happening, George Floyd's funeral, one of his funeral services was right down the road from me, like an hour. I was too traumatized to go. Plus, COVID was going on at the same time. So I'm getting all this information. I'm seeing all these visuals and different other things. And, then we're dealing with work life as professionals, taking care of your families. You already got that baseline there. The just encountering these things, and it's like repeatedly, as you mentioned, just repeatedly after, and then there's not small things. They're not small things at all. And the Ukrainian situation is just blowing it out the roof, because the deal is we're still dealing with death. We're still dealing with the imageries and destruction of buildings and rubble, and just people losing families and all this traumatic things and the visuals. So I've found out that I have to really balance the information, because I'm an information head, just like most folk, about how much I'm consuming, and knowing when to cut it off, because I don't care what doctorate degree or license we have, or where we are in careers. It's just like, I've just noticed with me, this stuff has really affected me, period. So my way of just really peeling back, trying to digest, not stay out of touch, but stay at a distance where it's kind of like the Heisman arm, I'm pushing it over this way or something, just so I can distance it somewhat, but still be in touch with it, because I know how much that has affected me.
Dr. Baldwin, oh, I'm sorry, real quick. I'm sorry.
Mhm.
I was just going to say, I think, when you talk about helping professionals, I think I don't want to say it's worse, but, for me, it's, well, what can I do? Because that's just how we're built. That's just, that's what we do. And so as we're seeing all this, I think it has a huge impact, because our thinking is naturally, well, how can I help?
Right.
What can I do to alleviate the situation? How can I help the families? But then you're kind of helpless, like, well, it's not much that we can do. So I just wanted to touch on that, because you mentioned it, and it really made me
Yeah.
that.
What I have, what has helped me, when situations have occurred and we're dealing like with the work environment, there's been times I've reached out to Dr. English, just like, hey, did you hear about this? And we've been doing this for a while now.
Yeah, a long time.
That was my way of like, hey, help me process this.
Yeah.
Because I really don't have anyone to like really engage about what's going on with me and how I'm feeling, and this COVID stuff I'm seeing, and visually, and the multiple deaths,
Yeah.
of close deaths that's happened to me. Just as a professional, we have issues of reaching out, even with us as people who help people. But where do the strong people go when they need help?
Yeah.
So I just reached out. It's like, hey, did you text or something,
Right.
call? It comes up in conversation. Now I haven't been a chance where it has not come in conversation where I had to process this stuff.
Right. I think you both bring up a really good point too, about just trying to buffer others, being in a helping profession. We often assume that role in our families as well. And so, as the, kind of mental health expert in the room, we're trying to buffer everyone, the people, in our family, the people in our clinical practice, our colleagues, healthcare professionals. The news that I've been hearing in both worlds, from educators are stressed and constantly, being under fire during the pandemic, and, all of the public outrage about schools closing down, not taking into consideration that teachers are human beings and they have lives too, and, seeing university closures, and then all of the stress on healthcare workers being frontline professionals. Those are our colleagues, we are those people, and then, keeping our own families safe, both from a mental health perspective, and then, going back to COVID, from a COVID perspective, from an illness and an infection perspective, it really, for me, came to a head in the summer of 2020, because I had a major car accident and I was trying to continue to see an increasing number of women who were the sacrificial lambs of the pandemic for their families, for their children. They were trying to homeschool, work from home, be the CEOs of their home, and, keep their families safe. And I'm seeing, an increased need in that way. But then after my car accident, I wasn't well enough to keep myself well. And my family was with me in the car accident. So I had that worry as well. So I feel like it's a really good example of how, especially for healthcare professionals and for educators and for other helping professions, that piling up of stressors eventually gets to a tipping point where you realize, I can't do it all. What am I going to do? And it's very distressing to be in that situation when you yourself as a helping professional are like, I don't know what to do anymore.
That's a moment of just loss, just being lost, feeling lost. So yeah.
Following up on what I'm hearing from you all, you've shared ways that you've been coping the past 2 years and helping your family cope, buffer people in your circle. What are 3 actionable tips that someone can take today to cope with the anxiety that's resulting from the news cycle and the pressure cooker that's been building for the past 2 years globally?
I can start. So I think I guess each give one. But I would say that, I kind of touched on this earlier, but what we do in our house is just really limit especially that visual stimulation piece. We do, like I said, we do more listening, and it's easier to, turn it off. The visual is a little more difficult to forget. But if we're, we can kind of unhear something, I think, a little easier. And I think for the kids, because if they see it, it's different. Then all the kids, they have questions, they want to, discuss it. We have definitely talked about, everything that has been happening. We have that kind of household where it's very open. We ask the kids their opinions. And, all of them feel like, oh my gosh, this is, just so unfair, especially right now in this, with the Ukraine situation, and they just don't understand. And it's hard because as a parent, you're like, I don't understand either. Like, I don't know why this is happening to them either. I mean, I understand why, but why? Like at the core of it, like, why do we have to go that route? Why do we have to kill people? Why do we have to murder? Like, why do we have to do it that way? That's the part that I don't understand. And that is hard for me to explain to them. So we have more conversations. We do more talk radio. And for my kids, they're not allowed on social media. They have TikToks, and that's it. And even with that, we're very careful as to, just watching and seeing, looking at what they're looking at. For myself, television, I don't watch a lot of television, and my husband doesn't either. But, it's more conversation. And I think for us, that has been helping. So we make sure they're aware and they know what's going on. But as far as them being able to see it and hold on and retain those thoughts, that is something that has been helping for us.
One thing, and I appreciate those tips too, Dr. Fanike. One thing I will point out more is support your own mental health, like with physical acts. There's years of research that's shown that getting a good amount of sleep on a regular schedule can help with mood and anxiety levels, within healthy levels. So like physical activities, where it's like pulse raising, exercise of sports like yoga, or just having a nice long walk. I find myself just walking by the river walk. Just the scenic pieces and finding nature trails. I've never done that before until now. So it's been wonders for me. Also, looking at this, creative activities such like hobbies and crafts, writing or home improvements, or all these things can help provide like an outlet or a distraction. And we don't want to forget the power of meditation, attending like faith-based gatherings and services, listening to soothing music. You know, every time you guys probably for my class and different things, I always have the music going. I have my Lee Morgan, John Coltrane, and all, you know, just to help me balance things out. And taking quiet time, you know, to read a book or write a journal. As DBH is the one thing we also promote is really eating, you know, healthy meals on a regular schedule, you know, avoiding the overuse of alcohol and other substances, and making time to connect either virtually or in person with someone you enjoy spending time with. You know, are great ways and strategies to really that I'm implementing. You know, I'm not just sitting here, you know, the things that I've implemented that's actually helped me and some folk that I know. So that's my spiel on that.
Yeah, I definitely echo, you know, both of your strategies. And certainly this is something that we've talked a lot about at CGI. We've been talking, you know, amongst ourselves as a team. We've been talking with our students, our faculty members, you know, again, trying to provide those encouraging words and prompts to, you know, do a lot of extra self-care. So what I like to say when I'm working with my patients, but also what I try to keep in mind with myself, is that when I'm feeling more anxious, listen to your body, you know, tune into your own cues, whether it be thoughts or physiological feelings like that increase in blood pressure, or the, you know, heart racing, or, you know, just feeling flushed, or, you know, feeling like you're buzzing in response to news, or even a violent TV show. So something that I usually recommend for moms, especially when they, you know, come home with a new baby and they're sleep deprived, is don't watch crime shows. Like, watch something funny instead, something that is lighthearted, something that's entertaining from the humorous perspective, so that it's a light lifted off of, you know, it's a weight lifted off of you rather than an additional, you know, sort of burden placed upon you. Because we have to really carefully mind the, you know, the piling of those stressors. So if we're able to think about the additive effect of news and work stress and family stress and relationship stress, and, you know, kind of really break that down, and we tune into the way that our body is responding, whether it's having a harder time with sleep, or having a harder time with digestion, or, you know, just feeling exhausted, having chronic pain in the body. You know, a lot of those physiological responses are directly tied to the additive effects of toxic stress. And particularly for people of color in the United States, as well as globally, the effects and the impacts of toxic stress are far, far more significant than for white people or for Caucasian people. And so, you know, we have to be really knowledgeable about the impacts of toxic stress, about tuning into our body and saying things, instead of saying, why am I so tired? You know, why, maybe saying, you know, well, what does my body need from me today? And how can I give it what it needs? You know, instead of considering your body something to just push through and just, you know, get through it, like that American capitalist work ethic, you know, to instead say, well, hold on a second, my body is the only one I ever get. And what if I consider my body just like I would a child? So if a child says I'm thirsty, if a child says I'm hungry, if a child says I need to go to the bathroom, we're going to take care of that need. So why are we going to push ourselves through hunger, for thirst, you know, bathroom breaks, you know, sitting and doom scrolling, or sitting in front of the, you know, because most of us are working from home or have worked from home. So there's a tendency to just sit, you know, in front of the screen and not take breaks, not get up, not interact with other people, you know. So really paying attention to, you know, everything that you both said throughout the day, paying attention to how it impacts us, how we're feeling in our body, and just paying attention and doing a lot of extra self-care to really try to buffer our own, you know, interaction with toxic stress in our lives.
And Dr. English, you said something I just want to touch on real quick. So I know my husband, he used to always ask me, because I like to watch reruns of Martin And although it's like really old,
What?
and he, and he would always ask me like, why do you always like, why do you like watching more? It's like, I know you've seen these episodes 100 times. And I would say, because after a day of hearing, just horror stories and hearing about trauma and, hearing, even from like our students and hearing from clients and, just dealing with all of this heavy stuff, I just need something I can watch and I don't have to think about and I don't have to analyze. And it's just funny and it's just comedy and it's light and it's nothing I have to retain or process or, just hold on to or problem solve in any type of way. So I would say that even for us, just as healthcare professionals, just making sure that, we do the same. And I like with my practice and just, if I was there all day, coming home, that was like a big thing for me. Like I would turn on like some music that I could dance to, nothing sad. And I was just very cognizant of that. And, I would just like dance and just let go and just to release that. But I didn't want to like have like, I would be careful to not get on the phone with people that I knew that, hey, they would want to talk about their problems because I'm like, I am so full right now. And I just need to like, release and de-stress and I can't take on anything else. So I think also, you mentioned the mom population and that's a whole nother area, but we show up as, the all, we are we're the CEOs, we're the, we're the directors, we're the moms, we're the wives, we're the, the cooks, the chefs, the housekeepers, we're all of those different pieces. And so just allowing ourselves that space to not be serious for a moment. I think just being conscious of, not having to be serious all the time and allowing yourself to just, let your hair down and just relax and just have a good laugh is, I think, just so important. Not to negate what you guys do as dads and husbands and, and all of that, Grant. But, I think
I haven't entered that realm yet. So I understand. But I look forward to it.
But just really like, being cognizant of allowing ourselves this space and giving ourselves that grace to do that. Because I think sometimes we can just be so like, this has to happen. It has to happen like this and it happens, and then we get caught up and it causes more stress because we're not, and anxiety, because we're not able to fulfill all of those pieces. And then, of course, we know that leads to burnout. So
absolutely.
Trying to avoid that.
Yeah, and I want to piggyback on what you just said really quick by adding, I was at a conference, a 2020 Mom annual forum last week. 2020 Mom is an advocacy organization that does a lot of policy and research around women's health and mental health, especially for moms. And one thing that they, there was a great researcher there, Catherine Monk, who was sharing some of her recent research around just the impact of social support alone in mitigating mental health challenges for mothers. But, it goes back to that good, and I think, Grant, you mentioned this, that years and years of research that we know of simple things that are human being things that really support good mental health that our society sometimes pulls us away from. Social support is a huge one. When we are isolated from one another, we are stressed. Human beings are hardwired to need other human beings and to have safety in numbers. And so when we are isolated, which everyone was significantly more isolated during the pandemic, and many people still now are having some social anxiety about how do we get back together. And then the news drives at that by dividing us into these two camps. You're over here or you're here, and there's no in between. And, Republicans are saying this and Democrats are saying this, and never the two shall meet. But that's not actually real life. So I think recognizing the degree to which you're being influenced by the echo chamber that you're listening to, because no matter what it is, whether it's the channel of the news that you choose, whether it's social media, those are influenced by a specific algorithm of, say the things that people want to hear in this camp or this camp. And again, it really does not do well for us to be feeling like we're constantly under attack by the other camp, this camp or this camp, we're always under attack. So I think just really being mindful about not allowing the news to drive us to be even more socially isolated, to not, because I can't tell you how many times I've been like, I don't even want to leave the house. And more people than ever are saying things like, I hate people. I hate people. And I'm like, well, this is not good, because like, I get it. And I've said that too. I have totally said that myself, but it's not good for us to feel that way. And I believe truly that we are feeling that way because of the degree to which the news is driving up our anxiety about being around other people, because now we can't predict who feels this way or who feels that way. So now we don't feel like we can speak freely with one another. We don't know if we're going to be able to make a connection or have a conversation. So I think that's another big thing we gotta be mindful about that.
And I'd like to add that one thing that I've been stressed out about are these gas prices.
Yeah, and that's all over the news too.
I had the opportunity to do a little traveling to handle some business and see family this weekend, and I just the prices of that. I mean, the strain of that. So one thing that I appreciate that moment, because what it introduced me to was to another coping mechanism. I was in a gas station and at a truck stop, and when I was paying for my gas, it made the notion about donating to the Ukrainian as far as causes. So that was different. That helped me focus on the humanitarian spirit that the crisis is bringing out. As far as a solution. So there's sometimes that that's a way to break way of some of the visual pieces that we're seeing, especially as of recently. And there's nothing giving to a reputable, pretty much organization. Sometimes giving will help at least make you feel a part of the solution.
Yeah.
Of it. So I found, so even with the gas prices, I appreciate that moment because it gave me I had pretty much another coping mechanism.
Yeah.
And and it's been helpful. So it's like, being able to raise my, my conscience and, kind of work with, some of the anxiety and different other things, like, wondering what's next with Ukraine.
Yeah. Yeah.
So donate, good people, donate, and the humanitarian spirit is the way, what to focus on.
Yeah.
Be a part of the solution to help.
Well, those are all very valuable and sometimes quickly actionable steps, as well as ones that can be repeated over and over again to help not just yourself, but others. And circling back to something Dr. Young brought up regarding having conversations about these heavy topics, like the Ukraine crisis with your children, it's a delicate dance. And as parents, caregivers, guardians, you're having to constantly negotiate what's too much, what's enough. And sometimes you're faced with a conversation you're not prepared to have. What advice do you all have for parents, caregivers, guardians in regards to talking to their children about a crisis like the one that's happening in the Ukraine?
So I'll kick this off. So for us, we decided a long time ago that we had to have open conversations with our kids. My kids are 14, 13, and 3. And so the thing is that they go to school and, their friends have heard things or watched things or, whatever the case may be. So there's a conversation that ensues, at school. My husband and I, we decided that, hey, we can't avoid, having these conversations because we would rather them have more, I'm not going to say right or wrong, more informed conversations with us than they're probably having with their friends. And so, my daughter, she's the 13-year-old, she actually brought up the topic and she said, so are we going to war? And so we were like, okay, so what we do is we ask a lot of questions first because we want to know what are they thinking first? Like, what is your opinion? What information do you have? instead of us just stating an opinion. So it was, okay, so where'd you get that from? Or where did you hear that? Or, why do you think that? And then the 14-year-old jumps in, and the 3-year-old, he's listening, he's the genius and out of the whole family, out of all of us. So he's just taking it all in. but, and so then the 14-year-old, he jumps in and he kind of tells, oh, well, I heard, that Russia was, invading Ukraine, and, but why would they do that? So then we can say, okay, now we want you to use your phones for more than just, jumping on TikTok and Snapchat. So then it's like, for us, it's, well, look this up, and look up the history, and, look up, Ukraine being a territory of Russia, and, what is that? I want you to look up the history. So for us, we kind of do it that way. Once they look it up, read, then we say, okay, so now what do you think? And then we can kind of jump in and interject and say, okay, well, this is how we look at it. And, this is what and we've kind of followed that same model from, George Floyd to, we've had conversations about slavery. We've had conversations about everything to puberty, to sex. I mean, we're just at that point, in their growth. And so that's kind of how we handle things. We make them look things up so that they can come with some type of informed opinion and view, instead of just what they heard. And so that's another piece, is drilling into them. Don't just take what people tell you, because everyone speaks from an opinion, including us. So we want you to read, gather the facts, on your own, and then you form an opinion, and then let's have a conversation. And think that also helps them to just induce some critical thinking, instead of just taking what people give you. I think that a lot of times that's what people do. I've seen people scroll through social media and it's like a meme, and then they go off on a rant, and it's like, okay, hold on, where did you get that from? And it's like, oh, well, I was looking on social, and I'm like, okay, that's not a credible news source. So I think just, but what is a credible news source?
Right.
We used to go to, my go-to when I was younger was CNN. That was like, go to CNN, but everything is opinion based. So we have to keep that in mind. And Dr. English touched on that. Everything is opinion based. So we have to be careful of that. And so for us with our kids, that's kind of how we approach it. It's really trying to get them to read, dive into the information, really look at the facts, or try to gather as much history as they can before forming an opinion, and then having a conversation. But we're very open. Our kids, they're able to ask us anything. So at dinner every night, we have conversations.
Yeah.
Well, I'm writing those tips down for when I have children. I'm writing it down because it doesn't seem that we're going to be out of this anytime soon. The world is changing. So I'm writing this good stuff down as a non-parent, hoping to be a parent one day. So thank you.
Well, I want to add to that by just saying too, that I think taking into consideration child development is important, understanding that your conversation with a 3-year-old, a 6-year-old, an 8-year-old, 13-year-old, my 16-year-old, is really going to vary. And also we have to take into consideration as parents, or, as clinicians when we're working with children, that age doesn't necessarily mean that readiness. And so, there's a wide range of development within age ranges. And sometimes the thing that children have most in common is not their age, even though that's the way we educate children. So, really just knowing your kid, for example, my child has autism. He is 16 years old, but, he has high functioning autism. He is, very, very interested in politics, and he has very strong opinions, but he can tend to be black and white, and he can tend to get overstimulated very quickly. He can tend to be reactive, and he can tend to be pretty judgmental about someone else. So he'll say, well, that person is not a good person, instead of saying that person said something I disagree with. So we try to, again, come back to, well, let's think about this critically. So critical thinking is something that, certainly is not easy to come by in, the United States, unfortunately. And that's, I think something that good parents try to, really institute in their kids is, to go back to Dr. Young's, where are we getting our information? What are the influences of, the organization or the entity where they are giving that opinion or that information? How factual are the facts? What agenda might they be coming from? And certainly, from those developmental milestones, you kind of have to think about, how can I explain this to an 8-year-old versus how can I explain this to an 18-year-old? And inviting them, like you said, Dr. Young, to do their research and to talk about it with you as a trusted ally and, advisor and guidance, person in their lives, helps them develop that sense of safety and trust that they really need. Because the most important thing that they need to know from us is that we will always be there to protect them, that we are always looking out for their safety and for their, healthy development. And so, letting them know, for example, Dr. Young, you mentioned setting some strong limits around social media. Well, I'm not doing that just because. I'm doing that because of the dangers on the internet. I'm doing that because of the research behind spending tons and tons of time online, what that does to your attention span, what that does to you from a mood perspective, what that does to you from a social skills perspective. And so we're going to have to break this down in terms of what's healthy for us. And we're going to have to set some boundaries around that. So modeling, what is a healthy boundary around news consumption, social media consumption, and, applying that critical thinking skill to what you're consuming so that you're not forming opinions that are unfair. But also, when you do realize that you have an opinion that is just wrong because somebody has helped you talk through it, how to make amends, how to go back to a friend or how to go back to a person at school who said a thing and you said a thing, to say, I didn't understand where you were coming from before. Maybe we could, tell me more about that. And a lot of kids will say, my dad said this, or my mom said that. And it can be like, whoa, it could be racist. It could be sexist. It could be, it could be homophobic. And my son has come to me with all of those things and been very upset about those. And I'll say, well, just because a dad said a thing or a mom said a thing doesn't necessarily mean that's what that person believes. It's just sort of what they've been
Right.
indoctrinated to believe. So
Right.
maybe give them a chance and tell them where you're coming from and let them know, you don't actually have to stick with that belief just because your mom or dad thinks that. And,
Mhm.
so giving them some social skills to address some of those influences. Cause, I've heard everything. Kids at school, you're right, Dr. Young, kids at school will say lots of different things. We don't go to church. And so my child has been told he's going to hell. That's a hard thing to hear at school. And then, get through the day and then come home and be like, so they said I was going to hell. Is that true? So, helping them be prepared to think through some things, to craft a response that is age appropriate and not overly parenting, in the way that they communicate with their peers, and helping them set some really good boundaries around their consumption of news, social media, and opinions, facts. I think are all good tools to use as a parent.
I agree.
Thank you. Thank you both. I'm writing this all. I'm sitting here with literally with my
Taking
pen. I'm
notes.
sitting here with my face to the screen, but my arm is going like this to the side. Oh, you know I'm going to be me regardless, but
Well,
these are
that's the
great
other
tips.
thing, we got to stick together as parents. We have to stick together. It is way too isolating to parent alone. So, over the weekend, we had a reunion with some of my friends from college, and they have kids my kid's age. And, one of my friends said, my son is 15. He doesn't like to leave his room. He likes to be on the internet all the time. He likes to do nothing but video games. And I was like, yeah, me too. And she was like, oh my God, I'm not the only one. Yep. Oh, wow. It feels like you're doing everything wrong when you're alone. Yeah, it does. So, creating that community of parents where you can, ping, compare what's going on with your kids, same age, what's going on with your kids, same age. Okay, same, different, what should we do? So having that group of parents who can sort through this kind of stuff, because there are true challenges. Just because we're adults and we're adulting doesn't mean we have all the answers, even though it seemed like that when we were kids and we were growing up, like parents just knew. No, they didn't. They're doing the same thing we are now. They're just figuring it out day by day.
Yep.
Mhm.
Well, thank you all very much for sitting down with me today virtually and having, I think, some really insightful recommendations and perspectives to help us collectively navigate a lot of uncertainty and there is power in collective work. So we will wrap this up today. Thank you all for watching, and we hope to have another one of these perhaps on a more happy topic in the future.
This was fun. Let's do it again.
Yeah. Let's do
Definitely.
good news. Let's do good news
Melissa,
next time.
yeah, and Melissa, thank you so much for pulling this together.
Sure.
And pulling all the, my colleagues and leaders here to have this discussion, because even I know, we're recording and all the good stuff, but this has been therapeutic for me to process this again with my colleagues and, my folk in higher education that are in the field, just what's going on, how I'm feeling and, getting the help. So there's a lot of information shared today that's for me, and I appreciate it. And we'll just keep trying to make the world a better place, keep it balanced.
That's what we do.
So appreciate you. Thank you.
Mhm.
Happy
Thanks,
to do so.
Melissa.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.